My name is Hudson Bartley. Out of the Box intends to be a series of talks, lectures, and presentations that intends to be thought-provoking on various subjects, topics, matters, and issues to do with life, living, faith, reality, etc., as it concerns the community, but specifically people of African origin and descent. I want to begin by rather posing a few questions, and I'll get straight to the point, and I will try to, as the youth say, keep it very real. Let me start with a question. What is it that stops the black community from progressing, generally, in life, to do with life? Let's think of some specific stuff. Employment. Let me give you an example. Everywhere around the country, the community, you can usually find pockets of black people talking about various different subjects as they affect us. So we're not unaware of what's going on around us. We are well aware that the community on a whole is not being catered for, i.e. as far as the government's concerned, people are unemployed that don't need to be unemployed, and that can be black folk, that can be white folk, that can be Chinese folk, etc. But at the same time, while we're aware of this injustice, we're also aware of another injustice that's also been going on, that black people are not getting a fair share of the pie. So, for example, if we look at unemployment statistics, we will be told that Asians are more unemployed than mainstream. Chinese, for example, are more unemployed than mainstream, and black people of African Caribbean origin in the diaspora are more unemployed than the mainstream. But what we also see in that as well is that everywhere there's an underrepresentation, black people are more so. So, for example, black people will be more stopped, searched, and arrested than Asians, who are also considered a minority. We're talking about minorities here. Expulsion from school, black people will top the board. Deaths in police custody, black people will top the board. Bearing in mind that others are suffering from likewise. But what is it that always puts us at the top? What is it that creates a situation where we're overrepresented in the negative and underrepresented in the positive? What is it that makes us aware of this and are able to find the time in different pockets around the community, whether it's with our family, with our friends, to talk about the injustices but not do nothing about it? What is it that makes it possible for us to confront each other and agree that we are either overrepresented in the negative, underrepresented in the positive, but yet cannot take steps and strides toward doing something about it? What is it that makes us sit and watch a program on TV where we're not represented by the unrepresented, or quite literally not there at all, while we continue to be taxpayers paying for TV licenses while the programs do not reflect that? What is it that makes us satisfied with watching and using and contributing to a media that does not represent us? What is it that makes us satisfied with paying our taxes, going to school, trying to find employment, and once we do find employment or get educated or do whatever it is that society told us we need to do and still come out at the bottom? So I'm posing these questions so that we can hopefully find some answers. And my concern is specifically to do with action. For example, if we come to the conclusion that the mainstream of society, I'm talking about government, I'm talking about political parties, I'm talking about educational institutions, I'm talking about law enforcement institutions, that underrepresents us, tells us what we need to do to succeed, tells us how we need to toe the line, and once we've done that, we still don't reap the benefits. Well, I suppose history has a lot to do with it. What we need is an action plan, and that's what I want to get onto now. Because for years, we've had various people, social commentators, politicians, academics, setting up different institutions, different projects, different programs, so that we can have a fair and equal society. But when we actually look at these programs, we will find that within these programs that's supposed to have stepped outside of the mainstream and supposed to be working or geared towards catering something that had not been previously catered for, we find again that we are still underrepresented. We've also been introduced to a society that they call multiculturalism, where it's supposed to represent diversity, race equality, gender equality. There again, we find that the people that are responsible are sometimes the very same people that's hindering progress. But the question we need to ask ourselves is, what can we, or what can people of African origin do for themselves, amongst themselves, by themselves, to make for a better community, for a better society? One thing we can do, and there are some suggestions here, is take some steps of action. For example, it's often been talked about that we need black schools. What are the processes for creating a black school once we have decided that black schools and black education are important? Surely it's to do with finance and funding. Finance and funding has not been forthcoming in order to create separate institutions, not for the purposes of segregation, but for the purposes of creating that equality that society is crying out for. For example, we have Jewish schools, we have Hindu schools, we have Polish schools, etc. But the problem there is sometimes they come under the banner of race, of religion, and not race, and that's a problem. So a Jewish school will cater for the needs of Jews, but it comes under the banner of not race but religion. Likewise with the Polish, it will have to do with culture, race, religion, education, that caters and specifically for those groups of people. When it comes to black schools, because the definition of black, which is the first problem, has been blurred, sometimes we don't know who's who or what's what. The first suggestion I have for black people doing something for themselves, by themselves, without asking help, is one of funding. We need to find a way or avenue whereby we can pool our sources together, put our finances together, and set up institutions, be it educational, cultural, historical, religious. Now, one of the things that's recently been happening is that in schools, they have had Black History Month, which has gone along the lines of catering for everyone that's not European, it almost seems. So that the definition of black has been blurred. And because we no longer have an identifiable, definition of what black is, it ends up once again being multicultural, which doesn't fix the problem. Because if we're saying, there's two things being said. We're saying that there needs to be laws and there needs to be projects whereby black people can be on a level playing field with others in society. But once a project has been targeted, you'll find that because of the blur and the confusion and the definition of what is black becomes confused, you'll find that everybody, which is the mainstream, is included with who is defined or described as minority. For example, black has been defined in so many terms that it no longer holds a meaning. It's almost gotten to the point, or rather has gotten to the point, where black is anyone that's not European. So we will have Asians, Chinese, Indians, etc. And the problem with that is not just on a term definition, but the problem with that is who is black, who is not black, etc. So what we have is, we have the same mainstream procedure defined with definitions of black that means nothing other than anyone who's not European. And the problem with that is, it doesn't fix the problem. And the problem is underrepresentation. Now, that's one thing. What I'm suggesting